Hi, everyone, and welcome to Studio Jake. I, of course, am your host, Jacob Airy. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've got a very special guest, Tyler Hummel. He is a movie critic and movie commentator for several places. He's written for a bunch of different online publications, including Greeks Under Grace and his own website, Cultural Review, and which I have written for Cultural Review as well. It's been a great honor. So I'm excited to have him on. We're going to be talking about Oscar predictions. So without further ado, please welcome the Antisocial Critic, Tyler. Welcome to Studio Jake.
Did you say Greeks under grace right now, or did
What
was
I
that?
said, geeks under gays. Oh my gosh, Greeks. Just for those of you who are
That
wondering, we had some technical difficulties right before the stream, so that probably threw me off a little bit. But
that's
anyway,
not
it's
the
good to
most
have you on.
that's not the most aggressive I've heard someone mess up the name, but it is kind of a mouthful, so I get why people make that. But Greeks under grace is such a that's about as inverse as you get. Like that's like it's like an orthobro website or something. I don't know.
Yes, indeed. It is. I don't know why it's not even that big of a tongue twister, but anyway, we're Tyler is joining me today because we want to talk about Oscar predictions, and of course, last night they had on, or excuse me, not last night, 2 nights ago. By the time of this will be posted, it will have been the Golden Globes. So it's what's interesting though is I had actually forgotten about the Golden Globes. I there wasn't didn't seem to be a whole lot of buzz about them. Not and not as certainly not since the Ricky Gervais uh, when he hosted it a couple of years ago, and had so much fun poking at the audience. It seemed like this time it was really low key, even though NBC did uh, both uh, play it for television and they also streamed it to Peacock. But was I just in a bubble, Tyler? Was there a lot of fanfare about the Golden Globes and I just missed it? That's certainly possible.
I mean, the Golden Globes and ostensibly the Oscars, as we're going to be discussing, are two of those appendages that are just falling off the dying corpse of the neoliberal world order as it's slowly fading into irrelevance, much like late night television and Saturday Night Live. Like the effectively no one watches them, but everyone watches them by weight of the fact that they are these ancient cultural institutions that you just can't you can't question, and if you get invited to them you are in the it party. Like I don't even I can't imagine most of them are even profitable, but it has that prestige of being the thing that's been around for 80 years, and that's enough for some people. And obviously that's how Jimmy Fallon still manages to have a career in the year of our Lord 2022. In
Well, well,
I
you
don't
know, it's
I was trailing off, but you go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, for me, I always did feel, even if I disagreed with some of their choices or their picks, I honestly, up until I would say 2012, so about 11 years ago, I did still think they were at least trying to reward good cinematic art. So even though I would be frustrated that, one of my favorite films that I thought should have been nominated didn't get nominated, I still had this idea that, oh, well, at least they're trying to reward art. But I feel like post 2012, so I think 2012 was the year The Artist won. And I feel that that movie, whatever you think about silent films, I actually felt like, oh wow, this is a masterpiece. This was a truly brilliant film, and also it was European, and everyone knows how I feel about European cinema. So the fact that I'm touting that I'm singing its praises ought to tell you something. But I feel like it's kind of gone since 2012. It feels like it's been the Oscars, at least more publicly, has become more about, hey, I'm going to pat this guy on the back because he says the right things, he writes the right lines, he directs the right films. This person stars in the right films, they say the right things in interviews. What do you think about that?
Uh, I agree. I agree and I disagree because we definitely have seen more of a push for progressivism in the Oscars in the past few years. I mean, obviously the Oscars So White scandal wasn't so that long ago, and because of that, they definitely pushed forward a lot more, you know, Black, Indigenous, Latino filmmakers, film critics, people of that sort into the Oscar voting pool, which on paper is perfectly fine, but it seems that the people they brought in were overwhelmingly young progressives. just because that seems to be the sentiment at the moment. And as a result of that, you start seeing more films that probably would have been a little bit edgier, starting to get more votes. You got Black Klansman a couple of years ago as a Best Picture nominee, and what was there's a lot of kind of films in that style of very politically aggressive film, politically topical films, kind of making it into the Best Picture category that probably wouldn't have made it alongside something like The King's Speech. But at the same time, you still do have that ancient conglomeration of baby boomers that only, for some reason, they just latch onto Oscar bait and they just don't let go. And because of that, you still get a movie like Green Book winning Best Picture, or what was the one from the girl who did Eternals? What was her? What was the? Nomadland. Like that. Like Nomadland feels like a film that is very much in tune with that kind of vague, not terribly controversial feeling, arty feeling, miasma that comprises Oscar bait, which is kind of hard to describe as a thing in and of itself. But it definitely, I definitely agree that it's more aggressively progressive than it used to be. But it definitely feels like that the younger generation is definitely turning the scales a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. And bringing it back to the Golden Globes, I feel that that with these Hollywood award shows, I see what you're saying. It definitely does seem like at times they want to pick the safer film because I think they know audiences are mad at them for whatever reason. If you're into science fiction and superhero stuff like I am, we're mad because we don't feel like our genre films have gotten the recognition they deserve. And so we go, what Green Book didn't a certain insert franchise film here there come out that year? Why didn't that get noticed? We all went to see it, we all loved it. So I do see that, and Golden Globes obviously is no different than that. But what I found interesting is a movie that, and again, this just speaks to me, this is why I always say I'm not a movie critic, I'm a movie reviewer. That's why I always make that distinction. Is the big winner of the Golden Globes was and I probably will butcher this, but the Banshees of Inisherin, which I should know that because I'm Irish, but Irish Cajun. It won 3 awards. It was the big winner of the Golden Globes. And and then tied for second was Everywhere All at Once, which won 2, and as well as did The Fabelmans. And I believe Banshees. Now they have 2 Best Picture categories at the Golden Globes. They have drama, which The Fabelmans won, and then the Banshees of Inisherin. I'm just gonna say the Banshees from here henceforth.
Banshees of the Irishman.
Yeah. Do you think that those movies will now be or were contenders for the Oscars for the upcoming Oscars? Do you think that those are going to be players in the best, because they haven't released the nominees yet? We've seen some short lists, but we haven't seen any nominees, at least as the recording of this. What do you think?
Absolutely. That once a movie starts kind of getting buzz, that's when it's usually an indication that it's on the Oscars shortlist. Obviously, it's still a little early to tell what's going to wind up on that. I'm looking at, I can tell you what's doing well on the individual smaller film critic circuits. We had, I'm part of the Music City Film Critics Association in Nashville, and they ended up going with Everything Everywhere All at Once as their Best Picture film. But that film group is mostly young progressive film cinephiles who all grew up in the 80s, and they all like Temple of Doom. So they're more predisposed to existential genre films than our baby boomer overlords. So it does not surprise me that Fabelmans and Banshees are in the lead up at the moment.
And do you have any thoughts on who might get on the Best Picture nom list?
Yeah, I mean, offhand, I would say I think the Baz Luhrmann Elvis movie is on the list. I would say Todd Field's Tar is on the list. I would go as far as to say that the Netflix's Blonde probably makes it on that. Amsterdam probably has a good chance of making it on because the director of that is an Oscar darling. He did American Hustle and The Fighter, and the Oscars like him a lot. So I would imagine him doing a World War II drama is kind of going to be on their short list. Adam McKay's The Menu. I mean, the Oscars loves Adam McKay.
You're one of the first people I've heard to mention that as a Best Picture nom.
It's like I said, the Oscars likes Adam McKay. I mean, I believe they put Don't Look Up on the Best Picture list 2 years ago.
Yeah, I could not believe that. I was so stunned. I was like, what? Even if you like the movie, which full disclosure, I did not. But even if you like the movie, I was like, this isn't really Best Picture material, in my opinion, obviously.
It's a comedy, so it feels out of place. But it's also a Leonardo DiCaprio movie, and it's a message movie. So you get your two for three is not bad if you're going on the Oscar bait checklist. And of course, The Fabelmans is going to be on that because it's probably one of the more sanguine and inoffensive Steven Spielberg productions we've got out of the last decade, and they generally like Steven Spielberg at this point. They liked Lincoln, they liked The Post. I don't think he's won Best Picture for any of those films, but he's Steven Spielberg. People like Steven Spielberg, except for audiences. Audiences don't like Steven Spielberg anymore. But
yeah, it seems like since Munich, he's kind of lost some of his cred. You know what I mean? Even though I actually thought A Bridge of Spies was kind of an underrated film that he did.
I would say. I think he fell off after Saving Private Ryan, not because his movies got bad, but because he stopped making movies for other people at that point. And I'm not saying that as a slam. I'm saying that as his taste as an artist changed, which is perfectly legitimate. Obviously when you go make something like AI, artificial intelligence, as a late, project to honor one of your colleagues, because it was a Stanley Kubrick project initially, that's not something that's probably going to set him off on a different artistic direction than being the guy who made Jurassic Park and Indiana Jones. That's obviously what happened. Now he's bored making action movies, so he just makes $200 million musicals that flop, and he does not suffer the consequences because he is in fact Steven Spielberg.
I feel like too, a lot of people recognize. People don't give the audience too much credit, and there have been times. I always say I'm an audience person, but there have been times I've disagreed with the audience as well. But with Spielberg, I think people were put off by him saying, oh no, we shouldn't let Netflix into the Academy. But then he goes and does a commercial for Disney Plus. So it's like he's willing to shill for his buddy Bob Iger, but who, it's basically the same thing. Disney Plus is doing originals, they're doing TV shows, but then he's going to slam Netflix films, which, to be fair, there's a lot to slam about Netflix. But to say, oh, they shouldn't have a place at the table at all, I think people were kind of like, well, why should Disney Plus? Which is basically, I think people don't realize, Disney Plus is more of a holding place for, the works of Disney and now 20th Century Studios, whereas Netflix is kind of supposed to be like a blockbuster, right? It's the catch-all for everything. But as you pointed out, you think Blonde might be on the list. Do you think we're going to get a full 10 list, or do you think they're going to cap it off at 8 again?
It's possible they cap off. It really just depends on how many offbeat films they want on the list. Because I could see them throwing something weird like The Whale on the Best Picture list because they generally like Darren Aronofsky, and it's Brendan Fraser's return. So that might get enough buzz to at least get a position on the Best Picture list. I doubt it wins, but I could at least see it. And there are some other eclectic ones on there too. I could see Devotion getting a nomination. I could see Bones and All getting a nomination because the director who did that in Suspiria, he's somewhat of an Oscar darling. So there's a lot of things this year that I could see making it onto the list just by right of similar films coming from these same artists. So, but it's hard for me to actually just say what I think it is beyond, I assume it'll be Banshees, Fabelman, Menu, Elvis, Tar for the most part.
And I actually liked Elvis. I know some people go back and forth on it. My big complaint about Elvis was it was more about the agent guy, the colonel. You know, I would have. He was the first person you see on screen, and then he was the last person you see on screen, and then he was. It was in their little afterwards where they gave the captions about what happened, the little historical captions. He's the last one that gets mentioned. So I that was my big problem with it. uh, I really felt like maybe they thought that the actor who played Elvis, his name escapes me, and I thought he actually did a good job. It's really funny. I watched it with my mother-in-law, who was a fan of Elvis when he was alive, and so she was like, "Oh, I didn't like it at all. I didn't think he looked anything like Elvis. I didn't think he captured And I was like, "Oh, wow, this is awesome." Of course, me, I've obviously never seen Elvis live, so I thought that was kind of interesting. The divide in Austin Butler is his name, who plays Elvis. But going to why do you think that movie did have such a mixed reaction, with especially because, like you said, people are talking about it being an Oscar contender and Austin Butler being a best actor contender. In fact, he was nominated, right? Or he won. He won best performance in a drama at the Golden Globes last night. Do you see Elvis going beyond Best Picture and being hit at other categories?
I could see it winning Best Picture nom, or not a Best Picture and a Best Actor nom, maybe even a Best Supporting Actor nom for Hanks, even though I think his performance is really bad. I'm definitely on the not terribly positive side of it, just because it
I was
feels
mixed
like
on
a.
it.
I mean, it's very indulgent. It's an elegant. There's a lot of good stuff in it, but it kind of feels like a cocaine-addled indulgence fantasy,
Mhm.
which I get. Maybe it's appropriate to make a 3-hour film that makes you feel burnt out by the end of it, and that kind of makes, and that's what you're going for. But we've seen this genre 50 times with other music biopics, so it's not even original. So your patience for that sort of thing may vary. Mine was relatively low as far as that movie went, but I think it's an obvious contender because of the subject matter.
Mhm.
People like Elvis. People go see music biopics. Almost every music biopic in the last few years has gotten an Oscar nom. Bohemian Rhapsody got an Oscar nom. I didn't the one last year get what was I forget the big one last year. I think that one got a nom too. So it's just a popular genre, and it's within the realm of recognizability for the people who vote on the Oscars to making me think that it's the kind of thing that'll wind up on that list.
And we kind of touched on this, but one of the favorite categories that I always keep an eye on is best director. I'm always curious about that. Directors have always, as a novel writer, directors have always fascinated me because I always felt like directors, even if they didn't write the film, they're still the ones telling the film, right? It has to be, unless there's studio interference and all that jazz. I get it, but for all those in the comments. But the I feel like the director still tells the story of the film, and so that category has always, I'm always been like, who will get it? And at the Golden Globes, Steven Spielberg for The Fablemans was directed, and he won. Others were James Cameron, Ferngully too. I mean, Avatar: The Way of the Water. Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert for Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Baz Luhrmann for Elvis, and Martin McDonough for The Banshees. Do you see though that list lining up with an Oscar list?
Yeah, when I was in film school, one of my professors had an idiom that said the films that win Oscars are not the best directed, because the best direction is invisible, but the ones that win Oscars are the ones that are the most directed. So the ones where it's show offy and you can see everything happening in camera, and it's all just obvious and loud, and you get everything that's happening. So if I were to guess which one on just the list that we're going off of wins best director off that, I would say it probably goes to either Todd Fields for Tar or the Daniels brothers for Everything Everywhere All at Once, because that movie is extremely show offy. extremely authored. It's obvious that every single second of it is thought through, and it's the kind of thing people like when they're talking about directors. That they want those extremes of extremely mannered, precise, character driven, or extreme visionary, energetic.
And do you think that, and now I haven't seen Tar, but there was this really famous clip of it going around where Kate Blanchett's character, I guess Tar, uh, kind of, people were saying that she sort of, bashes woke talking points in it. And now I haven't seen the whole movie, so I don't know the full context. But whenever people were talking about, especially some of these, industry press outlets, they were talking about it like, "Oh my gosh, this movie's so good," and I was kind of like, "Well, if this clip is in the film, it's either A, I don't, which is always my theory. I don't believe they actually watched it. Everyone just copies and pastes the same review over and over again, or two, maybe it's a sign that, like we were talking about, sort of that political pandering style of film. Maybe it's starting to die down, and so people are willing to give more airtime to films like Tar. So you see it as this is kind of a dark horse uh, contender. Do you think that I'm trying to think of a right way to phrase my question? Did you see the movie, and is the context of the clip correct? I guess
I've seen Tar, and I don't think that context of that clip is emblematic of what the film is overall, because it's ostensibly a Harvey Weinstein story mixed with a cancel culture story, and it's told in such a way that you're not supposed to know where the line is drawn between those two things. So it's about this character who's being accused of being a Harvey Weinstein style monster, but it's also this she's also this incredibly talented person who's being ostensibly canceled for that video and for her supposed actions, and it's not clear what the truth is, and it's kind of trying to just suss out what the meaning through that experience without actually getting to the core of it. So it's not a movie I would say is terribly audience accessible. It's 2.5 hours. It's very slow, but that one scene is not. It's not the director coming out against cancel culture or coming out against wokeness necessarily. If anything, it's more of like a Paul Schrader form of like baby boomer liberalism, where you complain about political correctness while you're voting for Biden. It's that kind of that's very common in Hollywood, where you'll get these like old Union Democrats that are like, all these kids and their political correctness, but Trump is it's very
Orange red bad.
Yeah, exactly. You get that combination is very much there in Tar. So it's not like the movie is really it's not rah wokeness is bad. It's saying something a little different. So I would say Tar has a decent chance, but it's probably not the right type of film for that I would expect to win, given the Oscars general tastes. I'd be happy if it did. It's a good movie, but if it didn't win, I would not be surprised.
Now, I want to ask you about two dark horse films that I'm using that term because I've seen at least both of these movies on people's favorite lists. They were both on mine, and in full disclosure, and the first one, but I haven't seen it on, which I know one of them apparently just outright snubbed it, but it's Top Gun Maverick. So it's always in at least the top 5 films list I've read. It was actually kind of funny because whenever I made my best of and worst of lists, I went and compared my best of, because normally it's totally off. Like, you and I have had this conversation, Tyler. All my stuff is usually way off the mainstream, but all the films of my list were at least on one other list, which really surprised me, which I put Jujutsu Kaisen 0 on my list. And I thought, oh, that one's going to be the exception. But no, it was founded on 2 mainstream Hollywood press lists. But Top Gun Maverick was on all of them. Across the board, I looked at probably 15 lists. And but it got snubbed at the Golden Globes. Do you think it makes it to the Oscars?
I don't think Tom Cruise is currently in the Oscars their good side at the moment. Not because of anything bad he's done, but just because he's not doing the films they like. If you brought Tom Cruise in Magnolia or Tom Cruise in Vanilla Sky and said, give him an Oscar nomination for something, that kind of makes sense because those films are a little bit more dramatic and a little more tuned to the Oscar sensibility. But Top Gun Maverick is, I mean, it despite being one of the best films last year, is a legacy sequel produced by the people who make the Mission Impossible films. It's a big budget studio blockbuster. They didn't even send, as far as I know, they didn't even send studio screeners out to contest as a awards winner. So it doesn't seem like the studio is pushing for any sort of Oscar nominations for it, which leads me to believe that either they're happy with the fact that it made $1.5 billion, or they just don't foresee it breaking that Best Picture nomination. I could believe you if you said that it was a dark horse candidate, because I think it's going to be on enough people's submission lists that it could wind up as a potential candidate. And the more I think about it, that does sound like a possibility.
It could end up on the favorite moments, like how that that's the only way Zack Snyder was going to win an award was by his fans cheating. But with Top Gun Maverick, that could be how it gets to the Oscars. Maybe they'll do a scene from the movie and make it best movie moment or whatever, like kind of what they did with Spider-Man No Way Home and whatnot. I could see that happening. The second film I wanted to ask you about is one came out of nowhere. None of us saw it coming, but then it was there and it arrived in America on Netflix, and that is RRR. And it was. I watched this movie. I watched all 3 hours of it, and I was genuinely entertained the whole 3 hours. I have watched Bollywood films before. Never have one ever made my top list. It did this time. RRR made my favorite films list. But people are talking about it. It won Best Original Song. It was nominated at Golden Globes for Best Non-English Language Film. It lost to Argentina in 1985. Personally, they also nominated All Quiet on the Restaurant Front. Personally, I think All Quiet should have won. It's just my opinion again. But where do you think RRR is going to make a splash at the Oscars? Like, people are, every time, it seems like I can't open Twitter without someone saying, "Oh, Best International Film and Best Picture." What do you think?
A man can dream. Parasite won in 2020, so it is not beyond the realm of possibility that RRR manages to be the dark horse pick. The only reason I didn't include it in mine is because I agree. It's one of my favorite things I saw last year. But the idea of it getting the Best Picture nomination almost seems like it's too good to be true. So I'm just holding back my reservation and just saying it might break the top 10. I hope it does. It's probably going to win Best International regardless, because it's already getting that all across the board. Everyone that's seen it agrees. It just depends on where the vote sits. I mean, for the Music City Film Critics Association in Nashville, they ended up going. I'm sure RR got to the very high on that list for the Best Picture nom, because it wound up with a bunch of other awards, and a bunch of us had seen it, but it might be a hard sell to the old line voters. I mean, the benefit it has, though, is that the people that produced it are pushing it very hard. Apparently, I haven't received a screener for it, but I know for a fact that the promoters behind the scenes are already campaigning for a Best Picture nom from the Academy. So it's possible that it ends up being the dark horse nomination, and I would be very happy if it did.
To me, I would be happy. Now, if it gets on the list with Top Gun Maverick, then I would probably be a little upset that it won. However, if it's on there with a bunch of like stuffed shirts, Hollywood, like you said, Oscar baiting films, I will, because that's how I felt about Parasite. I felt like comparatively, it was up against all of these Oscar bait films, but then it beat out all of them. That made me very, very happy.
I don't
Now,
know if I had to choose between one nationalist war epic and another nationalist war epic. I would not be terribly unhappy if RRR beat Top Gun. I know there's a lot of progressives that have tried to make RRR their new identity, but it's a big nationalist epic. It's the kind it's the cliche goes, it's the kind of movie they don't make anymore, and I would be happy if that won just because of what it is.
to me, the thing that might cause it issues is it caused some controversy in England, and this is no spoilers. This is in the trailer. England, the British are the bad guys in the film. I mean, it's super obvious, and it's caused some controversy there. I know that a lot of British film critics were giving it good reviews, but there were actually a few. I read one where the guy basically said this is just it's just a propaganda film from the Modi government, which I am not up on India politics. I'm just quoting this gentleman's review. So I could see like maybe that affecting it is if although I don't know, do we get a lot? Does Hollywood get a lot of returns from the British box office? Seems like
No,
Germany and France give us the most money when it comes to Europe.
I mean the great thing about seeing other cultures' movies is you get to see the way that they try to depict other cultures and usually fail. Because everyone always accuses America of incorrectly be portraying the world as in this cartoonish lens. But if you watch a movie like Wolf Warrior or Doom 3, another Bollywood movie, and you just see the cartoonish ways that they portray America in those movies, you kind of get the way it's an enlightening experience just seeing just how goofy they portray us. And
Oh yeah, Japan as well. I just watched Shin Godzilla recently. That I was thinking, oh well, they gave us some grace, but yeah, just that cartoonish way, as you were saying.
yeah, it's like the president's like a cowboy with a giant mustache, and they have the most inexplicable accents. I think it's funny, but I'm sure if I were British, I might be a little sore on that because the British Empire wasn't unrelentingly evil. It was an empire, and empires do bad things by right of the fact that they're empires. So seeing, I believe Ray Stevenson just being incredibly racist to Indians for 20 minutes, it's a little bit hard to watch. Maybe there were Englishmen that were that bad. I don't know. But you can tell this is a movie that's specifically written for a specific kind of Indian perspective on the world. So if nothing else, I like it for that, and the fact that it also gives the Anglos a bit what for is just a little icing on the cake for an American.
And also, shifting gears a little bit, is I could talk about RRR all night. Like I said, I really had a lot of fun with that movie. But I want to move on to two categories that may disappear, and that is Best Actor, Best Actress. Colin Farrell won at the Golden Globes. Michelle Yeoh won Best Actress at the Golden Globes, and she went over her time during her speech, which and they tried to play her off, and she threw kind of like a little bit of a fit about it. I thought that was kind of funny, but I kind of feel like I like. By the way, I gave a positive review to Everything Everywhere All at Once. It was in my top favorite films. I do feel like Michelle Yeoh sometimes her agent is bad at picking films, or I shouldn't say films. They're bad at picking TV shows for her. Like Star Trek Discovery was a total disaster. The Witcher Blood Origin was a total disaster. But with in that she was supposed to get a Star Trek spinoff, that never happened. So I was glad to see her be honored for Everything Everywhere All at Once. I thought it was well deserved. Do you? I know I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but do you see who do you think is on the short list for those categories at the Oscars, and who do you think might win?
I mean, I'll add for Michelle Yeoh. You think that the person who does all of her booking is not great, but I'm just
Well, it's
sitting
a
here
TV.
Well, even that, like she's like in every franchise at the moment. She's in Shang-Chi, she's in Star Wars, she's in Star Trek. Like any amount of any person that has that much influence, that's impressive. And everything everywhere all at once is definitely her best performance since Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which I'm curious if people remember that one or not. But
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's one of
good.
my
I
favorite
mean,
martial arts films.
I think people nowadays need to go back and watch that and remember where she came from, because I think there's so many people are being like, oh yeah, it's the everything everywhere lady. I'm like, she's been doing this for a long time. She's very good at what she does. And if I had to guess, I'd say she's probably the runaway leader at the moment, just because of how much that performance demands from her and how much she gives. I mean, she's a very good actress, and that's one of those movies where she's giving something that's significantly more than you'd expect.
Mm-hmm.
And I the only thing I could see going wrong is that maybe the Oscar voters don't appreciate the millennial answer to 2001: A Space Odyssey, but it is a kind of movie that's kind of break a few people's brains. I don't know who I would consider the runner up though. Maybe one of the actresses from Babylon, because there's a couple. Margot Robbie is pretty good in Babylon. Maybe Tilda Swinton in 3,000 Years of Longing. I'm looking down my list right now just to see if there's anything else that comes up to mind. Probably one of the girls from She Said, the New York Times Harvey Weinstein biopic, which, oh dear Lord, I forgot about that. That movie is definitely going to wind up on lists because it is exactly Oscar. Oh dear Lord, I just realized what's going to win Best Picture. I'm sorry. I need to have an existential
at the
crisis.
box office. It was a bomb.
It doesn't matter. It's it's the Harvey Weinstein movie. I saw it in theaters. It was terrible. Did you see the clip that came out of it where it's the two girls in a bar and then a guy walks up to her and tries to do a sexism, and then the women proceed to growl at him like,
oh Lord,
it is going to win Best Picture, and this is and that scene is emblematic of the entire movie. Like they somehow I could go on for an hour about how much that movie annoyed me. But now I'm convinced it's going to win. Dear Lord.
Let me throw out another name for Best Actress, because this movie's been getting a lot of press. Everyone knows how I feel about the director, but Janelle Monáe from Glass Onion. I've not seen the Glass Onion after his. I have hated every single Rian Johnson movie. The only one
I was gonna say your arch enemy's movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna. So I gave up after Knives Out. The only good thing he's ever directed was that one episode of Breaking Bad. But I just think I just hear it getting a lot of buzz. Do you think that she could be a contender for Best Actress? Because people seem to be praising her performance in particular, and Hugh Grant for like his 5-second cameo is what I've heard.
I wasn't wild about her performance. She's fine in the movie, but I don't think they gave her character enough to really make it like a shining role. It's just kind of one of those gravity characters that everyone orbits around by right of the plot. I don't want not to be too dour on her. I could see her getting a nomination just by right of the fact that her character is so important in that film, but it's not super showy, and I wouldn't say that she does anything particularly massive with the material. Even the way like Ana de Armas did in the first Knives Out, where she kind of has that vulnerability that makes her the core of the film, and you kind of just feel bad for her the entire time. Like that wasn't the emotion I got from Glass Onion.
Interesting. And Best Actor, do you think Colin Farrell won for Banshee? Do you think that repeats, or do you see someone else getting the nomination?
Colin Farrell seems like the safe bet. I mean, he's definitely made a big turnaround into being serious Oscar man in the last couple of years. Oh, Cate Blanchett in Tar is a good best female nominee, and I'd also give Ana de Armas in Blonde as a female nominee. In terms of other male ones,
What do you think, Chris Pine or Harry Styles for "Don't Worry, Darling"?
Oh yeah, I'd say that maybe maybe one of the male leads from Babylon or Fablemans. It's kind of a wash. I mean, this year there were a lot of good performances this year, but when I think of just like the maximalist performances that everyone goes for, is like, oh, that thing, that the one that the career like performance of a lifetime sort of things. I think of Michelle Yeoh, I think of Cate Blanchett, and for best supporting actor, I'd say the actor who played Short Round in Temple of Doom in Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Ke Huy Quan.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I think that's his name. Apologies if I pronounced that wrong. Please let me know in the comments. I will correct. I mean no disrespect.
Is it offensive if I just call him Short Round? That's what he's. That's what he's known
it's interesting because Temple of Doom has been one of these things where these millennial and Gen Z reviewers have gone back and have said, "Oh, this movie's problematic." To his credit, he defended the movie. He said, "I don't know what you're talking about. I was given this big role. It was this huge opportunity, and thanks to Spielberg, I got all these other opportunities to act." So, and also, I think the actor, his name escapes me, but the actor who played the village chief in that movie, he also defended the film. He actually, I want to applaud him for doing that and defending his work and not, caving sort of to the social media pitchforks at the time. So credit to him.
Yeah, who wants to be the first one in the room to say Steven frigging Spielberg is racist? Do you really want to be that guy who's make that claim after the guy made Schindler's List? Actually, I know they've tried to do that to Amistad, but they're not going to succeed in taking out an Indiana Jones. That's only James Mangold is going to make that accomplishment.
That's a good point. And, one thing, we don't have to talk about this for very long, but, there's been this talk if they're going to get rid of gendered categories at the Oscars. So it's just going to be best performance, best supporting performance or whatever. Now, a few people are like, well, then that will shorten the show. And they don't want that for some reason. I've heard that it's possible they might bring back genre categories because I know the Oscars kind of did away with those or most of them. They used to be way more back in the good old days. I've heard that might come back, and also that they might do best stunt team for a film, and they'll that might be a new addition. What do you think?
I mean, the technical awards side of the Oscars is a particular non-starter for me. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, I come from a sound editing and film background. I didn't do it very long in any sort of a professional capacity, but it is the part of the film industry I am the most deeply acquainted with. And me being there, I can tell you the title of best or the best sound editor or best editor, that is very important as a status symbol in terms of your recognition for being a great editor. Because usually something like that only goes to someone like Walter Murch, and look up his filmography if you want to know what kind of editor he is. He's like the Apocalypse Now guy, he's one of those editors that can sit down with 10,000 hours of film and turn it into the greatest film of like the 1970s. He's one of those people that awards like that are kind of more career symbols, just to mark that this is a person that does very good work consistently, and if you're a director, you want to work with this Oscar nominated guy. But if you're from a pure technical, proficiency stuff, I'm not impressed by whoever wins. Usually those tech awards almost always wind up being just a place where they stick all the, the commoner movies. It's like, Captain America, Winter Soldier, the best sound editing. I'm like, okay. It's like, you can say whether that film was a great movie in 2014, but just throwing it on those lists kind of feels wrong. Like there's if you want to be serious about the best sound editing, I could bring in people who work in the sound editing field, and they'll tell you is like, oh, this movie is actually innovative. This movie is doing something new, something different. It's almost never the ones that actually win the sound awards. They just come off to me as kind of condescending. So if they're doing one for stunts, I'm like, okay, it'd be nice if the John Wick guys got some extra, got a nice trophy to go home with, but
I don't know if this is true. I think it has been confirmed, but I remember, speaking of John Wick, that Birds of Prey, Harley Quinn Birds of Prey, when that movie came out, they were saying that I think Kathy Yon was the director. They were saying that she didn't really have the expertise to direct some of the action sequences, so they actually walked across the lot and grabbed the fight coordinator from John Wick, who was working on another movie, just happened to be on the lot, and they're like, "Hey, could you come in and direct these action sequences for us?" So I think this has been confirmed because that movie ended up being terrible anyway. But
that's not uncommon, though. I mean, if you've ever wondered why, an action movie will go from these really, quiet, stilted drama scenes to suddenly, super CGI action, it's because usually they have a separate team that just handles the action stuff while the director is doing all the character stuff. So that's not uncommon for a mainstream director to not handle the action scenes themselves unless they are
oh,
more
right, that's not what I was criticizing. I was just saying, like you were saying,
well,
they
yeah,
deserve
it's yeah,
more
I see what you mean.
recognition, and I was saying I agree. They had to bring them on to fix a film.
Yeah, and those John Wick guys are some of the best people in the business, and I'd love for them to get more. Well, not David Leitch. He's done so many. He's had so many opportunities to prove himself, and he's failed at every single one of them. But the guy who specifically does the John Wick sequels, he's like incredible. He is
To me, one of the most underrated fight coordinators for film is actually Chuck Norris's son, Eric. Eric Norris is his name. He has done some incredible fight choreography. What is my problem? Choreographing on B movies mainly. And it's so funny because when he did the King of Fighters film, which was a terrible film, by the way, but people went, "Oh, but I loved the fight scenes." The fight scenes were really well done, and then it was the same with. I think the first movie, like the first mainstream movie he did, was Mortal Kombat, the original one from the '90s, and that was the big thing. Oh, this movie's so cheesy, it's terrible. Oh, but the fight scenes, it's probably some of the best fight scenes I've ever seen in a film ever, and at least for the time, right? But so it's I would like to see him get more recognition because it just seems he can never climb up the ladder, probably because he has the Norris name attached to him. But I always, whenever I watch a movie, and it's usually some cheesy B movie, but I like the fight scenes. It'll come up fight coordination by Eric Norris, and I'm always like, oh wow, that's interesting. But moving on, I wanted to for the final leg of this, I wanted to talk about some movies to look out for coming up in the new year. What movies do you think are show promise? What movies do you think are that are getting a lot of hype, but they're gonna fade away, not gonna do much? What do you think?
That's a very good question. I did put out a list on Twitter a month ago, kind of listing out all the movies I thought were interesting. Obviously, we've got the new Christopher Nolan movie coming out, Oppenheimer, which I think everyone's going to go see. The most memed movie going into next year is the Barbie film from the director of Little Women, which I have been memed into wanting to see it by the joke. So especially that trailer where it turns into 2001: A Space Odyssey. I'm like, okay, this movie is operating on a very strange wavelength. I just need to know what's happening. There's a new Neil Breen movie. I don't know if you've seen that, but that looks hilariously bad. So that should be a very entertaining experience. I'm trying to remember everything that's coming out offhand. I have to pull up the Twitter list and give you a comprehensive answer. But there's some pretty good stuff. There's there's a Scorsese's movie supposed to come out in the next few months, but there's no evidence of that, so it's probably going to be late 2023.
Yeah, it's like by the way, I did not like The Irishman, but I like Martin Scorsese. I think he's a brilliant filmmaker. Everyone's like, you didn't like The Irishman. He made Goodfellas. I'm like, yeah, Goodfellas is a good movie. Irishman is not. That's my point. But I do think so. I'm actually looking forward to this film. But you're right. This movie is like shrouded in secrecy. You almost expect to hear that he showed it at a secret viewing in Santa Monica or something. People got invitations that were like letters, sealed with candle wax or something like that.
They did spend $200 million on it or something ridiculously high like that. So I'm expecting something relatively complicated. I mean, The Irishman was $200 million, and you saw where the budget went. it's a 3-hour movie with face de-aging technology, but
Which
I'm
did not
told
look good.
I'm told at least I understood where the money went. I'm told Killers from the Flower Moon is a relatively small story. It's ostensibly a Oklahoma cowboy-esque story about federal agents trying to track down people who are getting murdered on a native reservation. Like that's Yellowstone. Like you don't need $200 million to make that.
Yeah, it's true, and I would say one to look. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm curious to see where Megan goes because whatever you want to say about the movie itself, and I've heard it's gotten mixed reviews. I plan on going to see it soon, but I've actually, to me, the marketing behind it was a genius. They really took advantage of its virability. I really thought they did a good job. Like even when the actress, the actress's name escapes me, but who plays the adult who adopts the niece, uh, she was being interviewed on the Today Show, and they had people dressed as the doll behind her, and I was like, that is brilliant marketing right there. Like I was really impressed the scene on the subway where the girls are doing the dolls dance motions. I think that I don't know how. I don't think it really. I guess we'll find out this weekend, right? If it did really good at the box office, but I'm curious to see how that movie will go. I think that'll probably eventually become a cult classic. Sort of if I can make a prediction, just because everyone saw a video from it. You know what I mean? Everyone's like, oh yeah, that's that from that Killer Robot movie, right? What do you
Same
think?
with Cocaine Bear.
Yeah, Cocaine Bear. That's
I'd
great.
also throw as a curiosity. I'll throw Transformers: Rise of the Beasts on there.
Oh man, don't get me started.
Oh, you don't like it?
Well, I'm very upset that they didn't get the original Optimus Primal to voice. I grew up on Transformers. Transformers was one of my jams. That's one reason I'm frustrated. I do think it looks good, especially I'm glad they're making it a sequel to Bumblebee instead of the Bayverse. But I have to admit I'm just a little sour they didn't get the original. He's still alive. He had a cameo in Sonic. He was for those of you who don't know, he besides Optimus Primal from Beast Wars, he also voiced Dr. Robotnik in Sonic Underground, I believe it was. He's a very prolific voice actor, and I was like, hey, they brought back Peter Cullen. They could have brought back Gary Chalk as his name. So I'm just salty about that, but I'm sure it'll be a good movie.
Well, one of my great notches against my being as a film critic is that I have a deep affection for the Bayverse films. So my affection for going into Rise of the Beast is purely that they're doing another big budget Transformers movie, and I want to know what they do with it. Like I'm sure it'll be a little bit more along the lines of what the old original Transformers people liked from the cartoon, but my instincts are a little bit different. So I just want to know where they do with it.
Another movie to look out is we were talking about John Wick 4. I think that movie's gonna be mind blowing. The trailer is fantastic, except it doesn't show the dog. Where's the dog, John? But I think that movie is going to be a good one that'll do well. I'm curious if it's going to finally close the story arc. Keanu Reeves has said he will make them until the fans say stop, we can't take it anymore. But he says he's going to keep going. So I don't know if they're going to just finally close out this whole story arc with him and the organization and he who sits on the table and who is above the table and all that. I'm curious if they're going to do that and then maybe take the franchise a different direction. There's been talk of a crossover with Nobody. I don't think that's going to happen because they're two different studios. Just this, I think the producer's the same, right? Maybe the producer and the writer or something like that. So that's possible. And there was
go ahead. The third movie kind of got to me a little bit with just the unending terror and pain of his life, which my wish was that movie ended with him just winding up in like a safe house in upstate New York, and he just spends a couple of years being, living with his dog, and then start the fourth movie. The criminal syndicate figures out where he is, and then he's dragged into it again. I'm like, if you want to, let's close out the plot of the original 3, and then just find new excuses for why John Wick has to go fight. Like We've already made 4 movies based off of the one dog that got killed in the first movie. Like everything that's happened is a result of the one dog. We need more plot. We need new motivations because we're running out of them very quickly.
What 2 more films I wanted to ask you about, and one is Ant-Man and the Wasp sequel, Quantumania. The first trailer was awful. I hated it. But then the second trailer was actually pretty good. There are rumors of studio interference with this movie, which is always a bad thing when it comes to Marvel films. So, what are your, I can talk about Marvel films. You know me, I'm a big defender of pre-Phase 4 MCU, but so I'll take a back seat to this. What do you think of this film? What are your expectations for it?
Some other film critics I'm friends with have been really down on this. I assume it's not going to be a terrible movie or a bad movie. I think it's probably going to be a Marvel movie, which means there's a certain level of not problematic in a political sense, but just languishing structure and unoriginality that goes about the Iron Man 2 Thor Dark World levels that they will permit. And there's also the highs of the better movies in the MCU. So I don't presume it's going to be a bad movie in any reasonable sense. My takeaway from the last trailer was that it was kind of funny that they're trying to do a serious close out the Ant-Man story kind of film with Ant-Man, because it seems like the whole point of his character was he was always the bum around, not a serious, not relatively low stakes guy hanging around the edges of the MCU. They got that right with Ant-Man and the Wasp. Like the stakes of that film is whether 2 people die, which that's not a nothing, but it's a relatively low stakes compared to half the universe dying or the planet being destroyed by a meteor. Like those are not the plots Ant-Man does. So seeing Ant-Man get tied up with Kang the Conqueror and has to possibly sacrifice himself, it's a little bit, it might be a little bit much, but it's Peyton Reed. He's not, I don't consider him an artist who's got any particular great chops. So it's possible that it's just going to be pretty good, maybe a little atonal and strange, but probably a decent movie. I'm just not going into it with any sort of radical take one way or the other.
Yeah, that's pretty much been me post Endgame. So I feel you there, and it's such a disappointment that I actually wish they hadn't have immediately jumped in with Scott Lang just as a comic book fan. I wish we would have gotten the start with the original Ant-Man and the Wasp. In fact, apparently Joss Whedon was going to do that in the original Marvel's The Avengers. He was going to introduce Ant-Man and the Wasp and have the original Avengers lineup plus Captain America, and then Hawkeye and Black Widow were just going to kind of be on the peripheral of the film. But Marvel Studios, they'd already introduced those 2 characters, hence they wanted them to be a main part of it. But the last movie is our good friend M. Night Shyamalan is back. This is one of these guys I don't know what happened to. If you watch his early films, he was new, he was innovative, he had this really good thrill. And I know I'm on the minority. I actually thought Split was pretty good. I didn't think it was as good as his previous work, obviously, but I was like, oh, okay, so this is kind of actually a decent, film. But then you watch movies like Old, and you're like, oh my gosh, what happened to this guy? And what do you think about his latest knock at the Cabin? Do you think that this is going to be any new or groundbreaking thing from him?
I haven't seen the trailer for Knock on the Cabin. I have my hope for M. Night Shyamalan died in the arms of glass, and it has never come back. I know that there are people who say that some of his television work is okay. I know there are people that watched Old and said that it was interesting, but I've also heard people who watched The Visit and said it was interesting, and I watched it. and I was forced to watch an old lady throw a diaper in a child's face, and I have never forgiven Shyamalan for this. So and also it was, and I like Split too, but supposedly Split was an older script, which would explain why it's just this aberration in his filmography, where it's just so much better than everything else he's done for decades. And then you watch Glass, and it's this weird egomaniacal ego trip, and extremely pretentious, extremely serious, self-serious, constantly throwing new plot twists at you because that's what it thinks you want. And I just realized, okay, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's past his prime. He's lost whatever the secret to his original creative success was. Maybe that was a creative partner, because a lot of times when a director falls off, it's because someone who was a key partner in their life is gone, and they no longer temper them. But I can't tell you what that secret is. Just something is gone, and it hasn't come back, and I have no reason to assume it's ever going to come back. And I have no hope.
Yeah, it's true. You see this with the split between oh man, now Seth Rogen and why am I blanking? James Franco. It's clear James Franco was the actual genius in that duo, in that partnership, because since Rogen has thrown him under the bus, all his stuff has been a failure. And Franco is he just got cast to play Fidel Castro. I think it's kind of funny because like all these people are like, oh, how could anyone, casting a Caucasian actor to play a Cuban, and then but then I thought it was really funny because Fidel Castro's daughter was like, hey, I'm a fan of James Franco. I think he'd be a great person to play my father. So he got kind of an endorsement. So I would be curious how that's going to go down. But anyway, Tyler, do you have any closing thoughts about the Oscars or the Golden Globes that you'd like to share before we end the interview?
The wrong movie is going to win, because it's always the wrong movie. I mean, there are times when the wrong movie wins and it's funny, and then there are times when the wrong movie wins and it makes me frustrated. Like even when Parasite won, and that's a relatively good movie, I was annoyed because it made all the people that I don't like happy. And then Green Book won, and I like Green Book, but it wasn't the best movie that year. And Spotlight beat Mad Max Fury Road, and Spotlight was not as good a movie as Mad Max. So there's always just this pervading sense that the movie that should be emblematic of that year in filmmaking is the one that just loses because of the taste of the Oscar voters. And for the most part, I think that's just kind of a universal experience that no one really agrees with the Oscar voters. Like the liberals think that they're not liberal enough. The conservatives think they're too liberal. The movie fans think they aren't movie-ish enough. Like you don't win. No one wins at the Oscars, but except the people that win at the Oscars are the people that get the Oscars, because then they can put it on their shelf and use it as a career propellant. But that's about it. The Oscars is the Oscars. It will continue at pace regardless of whether I approve of it or not.
Absolutely. And Tyler, where can people find you?
Well, if you want to go to Antisocial Critic, that's Critic without the C of it. It's C at the end of it on Twitter. You can find my Linktree page that has all of my film writing and journalism work, including my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Tyler Hummel. I host a regular podcast, which has been on hiatus for the past month and a half, but it's going to be coming back probably within a week of this going up. There's going to be a extensive dialogue with one of my colleagues about Avatar: The Way of Water, followed by some other interviews that I'm currently in the process of booking. So that should be back-ish relative to the time that this goes up. And beyond that, I'm always on Twitter. You can feel free to say hi and just come see what else. I try to post everything I do there for the most part.
And to everyone, definitely go and follow Tyler and leave us a comment in the comment section below. What do you think? Who do you think is going to win? Who do you think is going to succeed and take home the big trophy? I would love to hear from you and hear your thoughts. Do you disagree with me with my controversial take on Zack Snyder and Rian Johnson? This often comes up on social media, although not as much anymore. But For everyone else, I will see you next time right here on Studio Jake.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you'll give it a thumbs up, that you'll leave me a comment and tell me what you think, that you'll share it out with your friends, and of course, consider subscribing to Studio Jake. I cover all kinds of nerd and pop culture topics, including film, television, anime, comic books, and so much more. I hope that you'll also head over to my main website, StudioJakeMedia.com, where I have even more news, views, and commentary. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, head over to my locals page. That's studiojakemedia.locals.com. It's the best way to support me. I'm trying to build a little community there. I have exclusive reviews and articles, so definitely head over there and check it out. And I'll see you next time, right here on Studio Jake.